He only wanted to board a flight. Just another passenger, ticket in hand, no different from anyone else. But the moment he stepped forward, the air shifted. The pilot's eyes narrowed, whispers spread, and suddenly, the man was treated as if his very presence was a threat. No crime, no chaos, just prejudice, raw and undeniable, unfolding in front of an entire plane of strangers. Yet what none of them knew was that this passenger carried something far more powerful than suspicion could silence. What happened next left everyone in stunned silence and exposed a truth too many try to ignore. It was supposed to be just another trip. James, a seasoned professional who had spent years serving his country, was finally heading home after a long assignment. He wasn't dressed in a uniform, not carrying anything that would stand out, just a simple man with a suitcase, eager to see his family again. Airports had always been routine for him, the rush of boarding calls, the shuffle of passengers, the quiet anticipation of travel. But that day, something felt different. James walked through the terminal with quiet confidence, yet there was an unease he couldn't quite name. Perhaps it was the way eyes lingered on him a little too long, or how the smiles he offered seemed to vanish before they reached anyone's lips. He ignored it. He was used to it. Too used to it. Being judged for the color of his skin wasn't new, but today it carried a sharper edge, as though the atmosphere itself was waiting for something to go wrong. As he approached the gate, the tension thickened. Families chatted, business travelers typed away, and children tugged at their parents' hands. Yet when James stepped forward with his ticket, the energy shifted. A pilot glanced at him once, then again, longer this time. Whispers began to stir among the crew, an exchange of glances James couldn't quite decipher. He brushed it off, focused on boarding, unaware that within minutes, his life was about to be thrust into a storm of humiliation, prejudice, and a revelation no one on that plane would ever forget. James stepped onto the jet bridge, his boarding pass scanned, his footsteps echoing against the narrow walls. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to relax. He was almost home. But then, just as he neared the plane's door, everything stopped. The pilot stood in the entrance, blocking the way. His eyes flickered over James with a cold calculation. Passengers behind him shifted impatiently, but the pilot didn't move. Instead, his voice cut through the air like a blade. "I'm not flying with him on board." The words hung heavy, impossible to mistake. A hush rippled down the jet bridge. James froze, his heart pounding. He searched the pilot's face for a reason, any explanation, but there was none. No violation of rules, no disturbance caused. The only thing different about him was the color of his skin. Murmurs erupted among the passengers. Some looked confused, others uncomfortable, but few spoke up. An airline attendant stepped forward awkwardly, whispering something to the pilot, who shook his head stubbornly. "Not on my plane," he repeated, louder this time. The humiliation pressed down on James, like a weight. His throat tightened. He had faced bias before, but never so openly, never so publicly. Security was called. 2 uniformed officers arrived, their radios crackling. They glanced at James, then at the furious pilot. For a moment, James wondered if they too would treat him as the problem. Passengers leaned into the aisle, craning their necks to watch the unfolding spectacle. Every second stretched longer. Every stare felt sharper. The officers asked James to step aside. His palms were sweating, his breath shallow. He wanted to argue, to demand justice, but he also knew how quickly situations like this could spiral. One wrong word, one wrong gesture, and the story could end in handcuffs, or worse. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to remain calm. As the officers led him back into the terminal, whispers followed. Some passengers muttered their disapproval of the pilot's actions, but most stayed silent, avoiding eye contact. Silence, James thought bitterly, could cut deeper than words. In the holding area, he sat quietly, every muscle tense, while the officers spoke in hushed tones with airline staff. He could feel people staring from a distance, some curious, others judgmental, all assuming there must be something about him that justified this treatment. He clenched his fists, forcing back the anger, the shame, the disbelief. Minutes dragged on. The pilot remained firm. He would not fly if James was on board. The absurdity of it was staggering. How could one man's prejudice strip another of his dignity so easily? But what no one in that room yet understood was that James was not just another passenger. He carried something with him that would flip the entire situation upside down, something that would silence the whispers, halt the humiliation, and leave every person in that airport questioning what they had just witnessed. What James revealed next would not only stun the officers, it would expose the ugliness of prejudice in a way that no one could ignore. The room seemed to shrink around James. The officers stood over him, the pilot's voice echoing in the background, sharp and unyielding. "He's not boarding my plane. I won't risk it." Risk what? James thought. Risk the prejudice in your own mind. His chest tightened as dozens of eyes burned into him, each stare carrying doubt, suspicion, judgment. For a moment, he felt powerless. This wasn't just a delay, it was public humiliation. Stripped of his dignity in front of strangers, treated like a criminal without cause. The kind of injustice he had witnessed countless times had now come crashing down on him in the most brutal personal way. The silence in the terminal was suffocating. Not one voice rose to defend him, not one. James drew in a slow breath. He could stay silent, let the pilot's hate define him, or he could show them the truth. His hand trembled slightly as he reached into his bag. The officers stiffened, one instinctively resting a hand on his holster. James paused, aware of how quickly this moment could be twisted against him. Then, with deliberate calm, he pulled out a slim leather wallet and placed it on the table. The badge inside caught the harsh fluorescent light. 3 bold letters stared back at the room. FBI. A stunned silence followed. The officers blinked, their posture changing instantly, respect replacing suspicion. Murmurs surged through the crowd as the reality sank in. This man they had just shamed, pushed aside, and doubted, had been serving the very country that allowed this humiliation to happen. The pilot's face drained of color, his defiance faltered, but the damage was already done. Every passenger, every crew member, every onlooker had seen it. The truth could no longer be hidden, and in that charged moment, James realized, this wasn't just about reclaiming his seat on a plane. This was about exposing something far deeper, a wound in plain sight that America still refused to heal. The airport was silent. Officers stepped back, passengers whispered, and the pilot who once stood so boldly now shifted with unease. James didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His badge spoke louder than anything he could have said. With calm, steady dignity, he proved the truth. The man they had doubted, humiliated, and cast aside, was the very man sworn to protect them. Eventually, the airline scrambled to correct their mistake. Apologies were muttered. A seat was offered back. But what seat could erase the sting of prejudice? What gesture could undo the humiliation already burned into memory? James accepted the resolution outwardly, but inside, the weight of the experience pressed heavy. He knew that while his badge had shielded him, countless others did not carry that protection. For them, injustice often ended with silence, or worse, with tragedy. That night, James did make it home, but he carried with him more than a suitcase. He carried a reminder that racism does not vanish with uniforms, with titles, or even with years of service. It lurks in ordinary spaces, waiting to strike. And so the question lingers, one that every witness in that airport, and every viewer now must ask themselves. How many more times will this story repeat before something truly changes? How many more lives must be defined by suspicion before dignity is granted equally to all? This wasn't just James's story, it is the story of millions, and it's one that demands not silence but action.